it's been quite some time since I've deployed Defender for Cloud. So let's jump right in there and see what we need to do. So I am going to pull up the Azure portal. And I have a sandbox environment completely deployed. I'm still in the process of deploying the vWAN piece. So every component's installed right now except for vWAN, and it looks like we're working on deploying the vWAN, the VPN gateway component right now, which takes some time. So I'll just let that run in the background. But everything else in the sandbox environment, the default sandbox environment, is provisioned. I didn't add any extras to this. So, if you go look at, say, the Sandbox resource group, you can see that there's lots of different resources here: our automation account, our Azure SQL database, our Bastion hosts, bunch of disks, a key vault, a log analytics workspace, a bunch of NICs, a bunch of network security groups. It's another default capability that we have built into the sandbox, where we have NSGs protecting your subnets, right? We've got private endpoints and private DNS zones. So we've locked down communication to some of the services in the sandbox using private endpoints, which is a great way of protecting your resources. We've got a public IP address. This is what we're coming in against when we use Bastion, right? We've got some data here in a test database in Azure SQL database, right? We've got an Azure SQL logical server here, and a storage account, 4 different VMs, 2 VNets, and a vWAN configuration, right? So that's a lot of the surface area of Azure that we're going to look to see how we can use Defender for Cloud to tell us where the vulnerabilities are and how to mitigate them. So if I go home here and I just search for Defender, I haven't done this in ages, so let's just see how this works. So I'll go to Defender for Cloud, and it looks like I have a kind of a default security posture here without really deploying anything at all, right? I've got an Azure subscription and some assessed resources, right? But I don't have any detail on attack paths or security alerts. So as usual, we try to provide you with some baseline security posture information to get you started without really having to spend any money on anything additional, right? So let's go look at this security posture and see what it's got to say. So right now I've got a secure score of 61%, and I've got 40 different recommendations listed here of things that I can use to mitigate. I've got a secure score of 61%, and it's identified 11 resources as quote unquote unhealthy. So if I go and I say review recommendations, I've got low, medium, high, and critical, right? So let's take a look at our medium security ones, which are listed at the top here. Storage accounts should prevent shared key access. Okay, so that's by design. Our storage account currently uses shared keys to access, not secure access signatures. That's by design. We could go in and lock that down and only use shared access signatures or Azure, Microsoft Entra ID authentication to provide access to that storage account. And that's something that you could layer on top of your sandbox configuration after you deploy it, right? It looks like it's found some vulnerabilities on one of our VMs, jump win 1, and another thing on our storage account: access to storage account with firewall and virtual network configuration should be restricted. So this is basically telling you to be more restrictive in tightening down the firewall on your storage account, right? And then there's, like, a bunch of other lower vulnerabilities listed here, and this is what you get out of the box from a security posture perspective with Defender for Cloud without really adding anything. Pretty cool. So let's go back up here, and we could see here as well that we're only monitoring our Azure environment, right? We're not expanding to do these other things, which makes sense. This is the Azure Sandbox. Okay, and then there's a whole regulatory compliance section, which we won't get into right now. And then we have workload protections, okay, which right now we don't appear to have much enabled. But if we go in here to enhance our threat protection, you can see it's finding, multiple Azure resources that could benefit from potentially enabling the associated Defender technology with that particular resource type, right? And it's giving us the opportunity to upgrade to go find those things. Now, when you do these upgrades, you're going to get charged whatever the pricing plan is associated with that resource. So you want to be mindful of the fact that this will increase the cost of your sandbox environment, and you'll only want to enable this for things that probably contain either sensitive data or IP that is important for your enterprise to protect. And again, most of the time in a sandbox environment, it's best practice to try to use data that is not considered sensitive. And if you have to use any kind of testing of personally identifiable information or personal health information, that should be fully anonymized before placing it in a sandbox environment. That's the general approach. Sometimes that's not possible and it requires quite a bit of investment, but a lot of companies do make that investment. Okay. So you could see here a variety of different services that we can potentially protect. And then this last screen here, that was the workload protections we just looked at. This last screen here basically talks about an inventory of resources, and it's giving us a heads up that we've got 3 virtual machines that are currently not being monitored with any kind of endpoint protection. So that's a clear kind of opportunity to enable Defender for servers. So if I go in here and I say explore resources, I've got 23 resources total. I've got 12 that are being called quote unquote unhealthy, 3 that are currently not being monitored, and 0 unregistered subscriptions, right? So these are things that I want to probably start to work on, enabling protections on if I'm going to keep this sandbox around for a while.